Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome to The Way of the Showman, where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and I will be your host and guide along the way. And today we're having the second part of Another Sunset episodes, where we talk about the process that led to the creation of this show. And since I left Stockholm, Jay has put online a video of the entire show. And the interesting thing there was that he first put a video edit up of the show, something that I was really pushing him to do. You gotta document this properly. And he did. Made a show, and I watched it, and it was excellent. But then, while I was in Stockholm, he was editing a kind of documentary version, where most of the show is also there as part of the documentary, but you get interviews with Jay, with Ola and Sarah, who were the owners of the art studio, Den Fantastiska Platsen, the fantastic place, where Jay got to perform the Another Sunset. And there's also an interview with Ivar Hakscher, which we will hear on this podcast as well, coming up perhaps as soon as the next episode. But anyway, all of this is to say that I found watching this documentary version of Another Sunset really quite interesting, because it was almost better than the show, or it was at least it felt like more than. And it was an excellent example of where the medium of watching a juggling show on YouTube, how the additional layers of conversations, opinions, expanded explication on the themes that was going on in this show really added another dimension to it. So I thought it was a better thing to watch. I'll post a link to both of those videos, and you can watch both, or watch just the documentary version one. But anyway, this sparked then an interesting topic for a future conversation of making filmed shows with then additional material plugged into it, specifically made to be viewed on streaming, which is kind of interesting. It's good because the show is then what pulls you all the way through it. It's the drive. But to have these little digressions where you can delve into a little bit more, it made for a more interesting viewing of a show, which sometimes can be difficult to, translate a show directly onto the screen, particularly when you're doing comedy, or you're doing clown-based comedy where tension naturally builds when you're in a room, can so easily be experienced when you watch it on video as just dead time. So that's all I need to say about that for today. So now let's dig back into what we thought was the last, but turns out to be the middle of the episodes, exploring the deep creative process of creating Another Sunset with Jay Gilligan.
So I had 4 things. I'm not going to remember all 4 of them now, but like one thing to say was that the process by which juggling objects get made, juggling props are made, it's disconnected from the practice of juggling generally. Mm-hmm. And nowadays we get a couple of new prop manufacturers coming out who were previously professional jugglers, but in general the established market we have now of the props that are commercially available, they are manufactured and the people who manufacture them are not themselves jugglers. And this is really a big deal, right? Because then you don't get that feedback loop of personal experience into the manufacturing process. And there is, of course, in anything we do, a bit of ego. So you have these manufacturers who have their pride, and as they should. They own factories. They're manufacturing things. It's amazing. But then they also have their own opinions and their own ideas. They're not maybe the most informed in terms of certain areas of juggling because they don't juggle themselves, right? I mean, that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
you can, and of course, people can be, you can be a great coach for something that you yourself don't do, and I get it, I get all that stuff, right? You can be a great
Yeah.
violin maker if you don't play the violin, I guess, or whatever. I don't know.
The violinist is not the violin maker. They can't get sandpaper out and just fix up their violin. They don't know necessarily the process of why.
So so just to recognize that in terms of size, shape, weight, color, texture, material, whatever, it is partly arbitrary because the people making those things aren't necessarily, they don't have an, to use the academic term, an embodied practice with those objects. Mm-hmm. They don't have that interior, that physical knowledge about what they're making actually.
Yeah.
So that's,
you would imagine that when people are making a new violin to put to the market, that they are in a close contact with an artist who would help them shape it or whatever. And do they have that at the juggling factory too, that they make one and then they have some people come in and juggle them and tell them yes or no, so that they can bring out a line? Or finally comes now the Jay Gilligan version of the,
in theory,
Mr.
for sure
Babash's.
there's some of that going on, right? Like for sure, these manufacturers definitely, that's a great point to not miss, that for sure they have friends and colleagues that they consult with professional jugglers. Some of the manufacturers like Mr. Babash, they have their professional line where they have like the Alan Sulk silicone ball and the Mario Borusek juggling club and blah blah blah, and they work closely with those people to develop props. So that makes, of course, that makes sense, and you can find a range. But if we take a general overview, that's definitely not a common practice yet, though of course it should be, and maybe in the future this will get better. Like I said, there's not a lot of new prop manufacturers, and like you say, if one of them would suddenly die for whatever reason, you just lost a quarter of your prop manufacturing in the whole world. There's a couple new people coming up, and a couple of those people are actually previous life was a professional juggler, so that's cool too, So there could be some development there. Another thing to say about previous explorations of color in juggling, that's happened probably forever, I don't know, but definitely happened since I was around, is something that Matan Pressburg kind of, I don't know how intentionally he named it, or if he just kind of, I should ask him, like, if he thought it was a thing, or he made it a thing by just assuming it was a thing and giving it the name, but he calls it color coding. Mm-hmm. So you color code a pattern. It means, you were talking earlier about a Mills mess where there's two yellow balls and an blue ball, and that so the site swap for a Mills mess is a 3. It's the site swap number. Mm-hmm. But each and so when there's the site swap number 3 is the same number as the number of objects. Mm-hmm. Then each you can find a discrete orbit for each object in that pattern to get super technical. But what it means is each ball has its own pathway, its own orbit, and then you can color code that.
Each throw gets repeated again after 3.
So you can say the blue ball always goes under the arm. Mm-hmm. It's a very fancy way of saying that, mm-hmm. right? So you can start to color code orbits, and people, historically have definitely done that. They've definitely said, I'm going to throw this ball higher, so I'm going to make it the lighter color. People have done that. Again, I mean, that's not nothing. That's pretty far into some color theory here for juggling with technique. But in terms of what that color is, and having the ability to change what that color is, and to having some sort of any other thought besides just, that's going back to the painting thing, and like, hey, I painted a car and I used a different color for the wheels, right? Like, what color did you use? Why did you make them pink? Oh, it doesn't matter, Frodo. It only matters that the wheels are different color, man. I wanted
to use 2 different so that you would see this is the wheel and
there's
this
a contrast, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the conversation stops. So of course that conversation could be deeper. That was definitely one of the ideas of another Sunset show. And then another thing to say is this idea of nobody's really had a deeper or a more nuanced or whatever detailed conversation about color in juggling. I would say, previously, let's say from my juggling journey starting back in 84, 85, we were just having different conversations. Just to recognize that, just to say we weren't just sitting around being like, oh, I don't know what else to do. I guess I'll throw 9 balls and then I'll try to do 10. No, I mean, Siteswap came along. Like just to recognize, yeah, we weren't talking about color back in the 80s, but we were talking about other stuff.
Yeah, but it's
You know what I mean?
Every art form, or yeah, they talk about a whole bunch of stuff, and this, as far as we are concerned, is the conversation about color, and you're exploding that. So that's sort of, and it's something that's been going on for a very long time. And in part, it's because you have needed to actually craft these props yourself, because you have probably already then been pestering, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
manufacturers to try and get it made,
Yeah.
and some of that stuff. So you actually had to make these things, and that is a long process.
Yeah, I mean, there's also an aspect of that, and I wonder how you relate to this of being an artist where there's a couple things. Like, first of all, I'm old enough to know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And like, I'm old enough to know that I can do this thing, and then this other thing I should probably get somebody else to do. Like, you start to learn yourself as you get older, right? And so there's also an aspect of this whole journey of taking 15 years where it's like, I don't want to open a plastics factory. I don't want to get good at that. I don't want to know the chemical composition of the plastic that's in my ring, because not because I don't find it interesting or fascinating, or I'm above it or below it or whatever, but because I want to go spend my time in the studio working on what I do, which is juggling.
Yeah.
But instead, I mean, so you could say, yes, Another Sunset was a juggling show, but in another way, it was a show about administrative work. It was an office work show. Do you know what I mean? It was a show about networking. It was a show about communication. It was a show about uncovering. So what I
In terms of, those were not themes that were talked about so much, but they were implicit in the creation or the possibility of making the show happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like you have that. Sometimes in art, you have that tip of the iceberg. You see that meme, where they show that the show is above the water, and then you have the
90% is under the
water,
and above the water is what the audience sees.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, in one way, that's really this. I mean, that is 15 years below the water. Of this show.
That's a really good. That's a good analogy. And when DVDs was a really big thing, and to have extras on DVDs, me who love movies and whatever, to be able to see these makings of and feature documentaries about all the different aspects of it, I thrive on that, because as a creative artist, that's my actual domain where I'm living. So those 90% that's underneath your underneath the world there, I love that. So now, we've talked a lot about this already, about how it sort of came to pass, but you had to make your own, you had to make the props that was in here. So we're taking a note out of Eric's book.
Yeah.
You made these props so that they could be there. And so, and then like, just going back to when you then are going to make a show, and let's bring Ivar into it and do one more sort of talk of how big this topic can be. Because when you first start to pick at color, then there is so many different levels to it. It's like, what does colors make us feel? And when you then arrive on the scene and you go, okay, we're going to do a show where juggling and color. 'Cause to me, what the whole process is now, it's about deepening what juggling is. And when depth to me is how interrelated anything is with something else. It's like you have deep knowledge of a subject if you know not just all the events that happened in the thing, but how those events of like, in during this period of time, this was happening, and that's reflected in it like this. So then you get depth of knowledge, because you get a context and an ecology of understanding that goes through more than just a thin layer. So you've exploded color out of this, and then we look at that going, well, what does that mean then to juggle and color? And maybe we open with what are you bringing it up for Ivar?
Yeah, well, so A couple of things. I mean, first of all, the idea of color, because it is so well known in our lives, just intuitively, and just from everyday life, and also, I mean, just from like, we both have kids, you know, and then your kid gets up in the morning, and then they got to get dressed for school, and it's a thing, right?
Yeah.
Oh, Dad, I want the red shirt. You know, it just happens. And because of that, and also because of in the fine arts world, we can say painting, for example, is the perfect one, or photography, color has been so well, deeply explored to such a high status. I find it very intimidating, is what I'm getting at.
Yes.
That I'm going to go
what
juggle.
do you actually have to add to the conversation about color? Because you are now taking the steps just from, we have 5 colors, which one do you want to use, to I'm introducing color into this, and what is it called, like, you're always nervous that, is this even really a thing? I think it is, but then I'm going to do it all, and I'm going to have to make these props, and I'm going to have to juggle with it, and when people go, oh my god, it just blew my mind, he just juggled a blue ring. But get this, it was a different shade. Like, as much as they were angry when they heard about the triangle, will the audience get anything more from it? And in some ways, when you're doing the very first iteration of something, are we just rehashing stuff that has already been validated by the entire viewing audience, who are not interested in the limitations that juggling has had before? So, and
also that there's this genesis of like, okay, juggling can be art, so let's place it in the art context. And then you have, for again, let's say just painting has done such an exploration of color. It's just intimidating. Not that I'm pretending to live up to that.
Painting and its design, and it's the fact that you could in the 80s, 90s have a color wheel that could choose the color of your sneaker at any different shade. Like, and then you come out and...
It's just not a trivial thing just to, you know...
It's not a trivial thing to have something to add to this conversation.
Or even just to live... Like, I don't need to even add to it, but just to kind of even confront it.
To feel like...
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, to feel like you're in the conversation now as a juggler.
Exactly.
Who's going to take on color, and have I got anything to say? Have I got a place at the table to be in the conversation at all?
Exactly.
I'm not even to not... Because maybe you are not at the point, we are not at the point where we can expand this into... Going, I mean, Kandinsky did his thing, but then there was Gilligan when he did it exploded what we could think of as color, because he did it with movement in juggling. Like, so that's not where we're at. We're like, you're still just punching for the right, like we talked about. We are self-conscious about, or no, just low self-esteem about being circus, because we know we're only just above the mime. Or whatever.
Yeah, we always have to like kind of defend ourselves, or we feel the need to validate. Well, so because I found it intimidating. One of the things I did on this project, which I hadn't done in anything else before, and this was also part of the 15-year process. So this happened years ago. I started to talk to other people about it. I started to interview other jugglers about it and other artists. I had never really did that, on a project before in such a deep way, or always when we're working on a show, we'll talk to our friends and like, oh, I'm working on this thing. What do you think? But I really made an effort to intentionally seek out specific jugglers and to sit them down and have a time and say, I'm working on a show about juggling and color. And my main question turned out to be, what do you expect to see in a show like that? Because the thing is, again, it's not new territory in the way that jugglers do have a relationship to color. And every juggler I talked to immediately, whether they agreed with it or not, they got it. They understood it immediately. Like, okay, I see what you're saying. And then everybody, just to say, the ones at least I talked to, they immediately had an imagination about it. It was kind of fun. Again, maybe it's something locked inside the community, where suddenly if you give them the ability, the moment to think about it, the chance to think about it, everybody kind of said, oh yeah, a juggling show about color. Oh man, I would do this and this and this and this and this and this. It was kind of fun.
So that's fun, but but then when they then go away, it's a little bit like when Ivar Hakscher says you should wear gold when you do this, and you're going, yeah, that I see why that's cool, but that won't fit for the next bit or for the last bit, so that goes out. And this person might say, oh, if we're doing this, I have these ideas, but then it stops because it's not available and they don't have that drive.
No,
so
totally,
for
but
that to happen, somebody needs to kind of explode this a little bit more and go, here's one stab at color, and then maybe somebody sees it, even just for the fact that that hue of that purple, that's exactly my favorite color, and I'm gonna juggle that.
Well, so two things happened from this outreaching, because I felt intimidated.
To the artist, yeah.
Yeah, was I talked to Ivar Hakscher, because he's an artist friend of mine who's a juggler who doesn't juggle. He's a juggler in spirit, I say. He doesn't actually juggle, but he loves juggling, and he's an artist and he knows all of art history really well. So it's a great little connection there, a really valuable intersection of interest. And so it was so funny. I talked to Ivar and I said, oh, I'm going to juggle different colors. And he said, great, yes, you should do that. That's important to do. In his mind, he found it like worthwhile. And he said, but what color is the background going to be? Because I'm just talking about these colored props, colored rings and colored balls and stuff. He goes, yeah, but what color is the background? And of course, in my mind, I can intellectually understand that, and I said, oh, I don't know. And he said, oh, it'd be really good if you could change the color of the background. And in my mind, again, intellectually, I get it. And I'm like, oh, yeah. But I'm also thinking like, oh, man, I don't know if I have money for that. And how do I carry that around? I already have to carry all these different colored props. And now I have to have a background that changes color. Oh, okay, yeah. Maybe I do it like this or that. And then that had already kind of disrupted my you know what I mean? Like I was just so focused on the juggling, which is just hilarious that I'm focused on the juggling and then I think I've kind of expanded it out into color, but then I'm not actually expanding it out to the reality of what that means. It was such a big leap in my mind to just think that I could change the color of the ball, that I just couldn't conceive that I was going to have to change the color of the background that Ivar had just said, just the background. And I was mulling that over in my head. I couldn't really quite comprehend it, like what that meant. And then Ivar just kept talking. And he's like, yeah, but of course the background, I mean, you need the ceiling should be a different color too, because we can see the ceiling against the objects too. And then the walls and of course the floor should be. And it was just hilarious how at each step of the way of this little discussion, I thought I had reached the new barrier, the new limit of like, this is what we're working with. But then Ivar just kept bringing it out, like showing me the reality, because color is all relative. Color is just relative. Colors are relative to each other. It's like a physical, psychological phenomenon, and it's just relative to this color of red is not an absolute color of red. It's red. It's this red here, and if we walk to a different room with different lights and different colored background, it's a different color red. It's the same red, but it's a different perception of what it is. So then that was a funny little moment of like, wow, yes, I am working with color. Oh, what's color? And that was a fun. So I was really naive when I started the project, in both the terms of juggling culture, about the mechanics of how objects got made and bought and sold and how they were created and valued and distributed. And also I was naive in terms of what I thought color was. Because of course then I also asked another friend who pointed me to the work of Joseph Albers, and Joseph Albers kind of wrote this I call it the Bible of color theory, and in that book it becomes apparent that color is relative. Color is not an absolute truth here or there, but it's relative to colors are relative to each other. So I had this conversation with Ivar where it's like, I need to not just control. If I'm going to work with juggling and color, I have to go back to my fundamental kind of understanding of juggling, which is the three parts. There's the object, there's the body, and then there's time, and that all happens inside of a space, inside an environment. And because like Joseph Albers points out and says, well, color is relative, then you also, if you're going to control the color of the juggling, you have to control the color of the environment. And so the other thing, so parallel to that, that's one starting point.
And that was in the sense what Ivar had said in one way, like you need colored walls, or you need, and on the base level of that is to go make it one color. That's like the level one, because if roof, floor, everything is one color, then you now see the colors for what they are in the same relation to each other.
Yes.
You did also start from this. You go, color could be anything in the entire world, and anything, any thought could be anything in the world, and therefore we don't need to ever have another podcast, because anything can be anything at any, or could be related to everything else. So you need to have a firm place to stand, and you, as a juggler, you start by having the medium that you actually work with, your relation to the objects, which is like the paramount thing, and how that expands through time, through the patterns that you do. And that's where it started. So you go, okay, I'm going to start here. I'm not going to start with going into light design or going into LED screens with different colors at the back.
Actually, I did.
Okay.
Because the second part of that, this little story, I mean, they kind of, and then they meet.
Yeah.
So Ivar says this, I get the Joseph Albers thing, I'm like, oh, this is what I'm in for. But when I interviewed all these jugglers who all immediately had a relationship to what I was saying, I mean, I didn't meet a single juggler who was like, wait, what do you mean different colors? Like everybody was like, could immediately grasp it and be like, oh yeah, everybody has the desire at some point to juggle different colored things. So the other thing though about talking to jugglers is they always want to break the concept. Like they always want to like push everything to the end, to the extreme. And I see that as well when I teach juggling too in the schools, or I used to do, masterclass workshops and just meet jugglers and teach them. No matter what you give a juggler, their first reaction is, how can I break the rules? So if you're going to go teach them and you say, hey, here's this, like there are always these examples, but like I'll go teach a masterclass, whatever in Germany. And I'll say, okay, now we're going to do a pattern like this. And I'll show like this. And I'll say why, what concept we're working with. And someone will just raise their hand and be like, before we even start, they'll say, can we do that with multiplex? And you're like, why don't we start with the thing that you haven't even done yet before we start worrying about multiplex or body throws or whatever stuff, right? And so jugglers have this habit, this trend of like, let's push everything to the extreme and make it as convoluted and as hard and as challenging as fun too, And so that's what happened when I interviewed all the jugglers about color, is their minds immediately went to the edge of what is even we're talking about, because they just immediately wanted to just go as far as they could. So it was just stuff like, oh yeah, if you take a red ring and you shine a green light on it, it will look black, and then you can have like a red background and you throw the red ring up into the red background and the red ring disappears, and then the ring could be transparent, but you could light it from this thing and you have light on your hand that's a different color on blah, 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 blah. And just like all these tricks with colors. Because, and not again, because, and there, I think there's a reason for that, reflecting back on it, like now that I look back on it, is that those things you can talk about concretely with words. You can say, have a red circle in the air and then throw a red ring in front of that circle in such a way that the red ring disappears for a second and then it reappears because of the contrasting background. Those are words I can concretely tell you and express to you an idea. But when we're talking about what is the psychological or emotional effect of color on you in your everyday life, that is much harder to articulate.
Yeah.
Right? It's so hard to put into words a feeling or an intuition or a desire, or right. So
we don't fully have a language for that. It's the same that we don't have the language to express the emotions we feel when we hear the music or whatever. Like this is other. Its relation with music and us is a different relationship than between a human being and language. It speaks to us, but it speaks to us on an emotional level. And color speaks to us in a way that language can't penetrate properly. And so it's like in where you yet again find we need poetry to get to the truth of it, because you can only talk around the porridge, as we say in Norwegian. You can't get to the point. You just got to go around the edge of it or whatever. So there's something great about that. And after me watching the show and commenting on it, it's like we're going, yeah, we because in certain sense, some of those things, they can't be said. You can't come out and say, now I'm going to play this music and this is how it's going to feel. And then you explain the thing.
Exactly.
And if that one was better than the music, then you might not have needed to play the music.
Exactly.
Because it's going to be on its own.
Yeah.
And you've been a firm advocate of juggling being what it is already, and you want it to be that, but then you always have to meet people or whatever. And so
so it makes sense that, right, that people, I would interview jugglers and they would tell me things with words that words could tell me, right?
Yeah,
like,
so you go there first, and also
so,
a juggler would immediately go towards something that's sort of trick based.
Exactly.
It's a trick. Here we can do this. Now they change color. Boom, sweet. Now I go over here. I juggle something else, and here's another trick.
And most of those tricks involve lights.
Yeah.
So I mean, in the end of the day, it all came down to lights.
Yeah.
So Ivar and we started buying lights. We did start buying lights. Like, we went into that. That was the first direction. Okay, let's get some lights. Let's start doing some tests. Different colored lights. Different colored. You know, of course, in terms of the background, you could take a white wall and then you could just aim a different colored light at it to change the color of the wall. So you didn't,
That's right.
Stuff like that. And pretty immediately, going down this path of buying lights and playing with lights, I understood that this show was going to turn into a lighting design show. That the lighting design actually was the entire kind of point of the show. It was going to control the show. It was going to be the main focus of the show. And the juggling was just going to be a palette against which the lighting design could
be thrown. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, then what you're basically also doing is that you go, what I need to do now is to become an artist working with lights.
There you go.
Or I need to get together with another artist and make a collaboration with him, because he or she is a very good lighting designer. And in that way, I just did the shorthand in this one, and I skipped this step. Partly because of that, because what you have done concretely in your show now, you perform in a white room with one set of lights all the way through, because you have found this firm place to stand. I'm a juggler, and this exploration starts with an array of juggling props that is unparalleled in the history of juggling. That is not the comment that I think is untrue. Many people have worked with colors, but how many hues of rings is it? Because you come in and there is 200 rings, 150 rings or whatever, all lined up on stands. So they form like a kind of rainbow sitting along on the floor in patterns. And it's an impressive sight to see. So that's like one of the features of the room when you come into it. It's an art space. Then fantastiska platsen. You walk into the performance space, and you see something that you might think that you have seen before because you've seen colors everywhere. But juggling balls placed in a wave on the floor that you can describe more as we go. In all the colors where it goes from one shoe. It's like looking at a color wheel. So this is the color wheel from the sneaker shoe, made real on the thing, individually crafted, and everything is... And walking in there, the audience immediately gets struck by this amount of color. And like you say, nobody understands how significant this is from a juggler's point of view until the jugglers walk in and see these colors and goes, why...
Can I buy one?
Can I buy one? And they go, I wish this was a store. And if you had that, this would be an incredible launch of a line of products. If you could have lined that up.
That's funny.
Like, so like, it just goes, ooh. It's not that they had lived a deprived life or whatever, but somebody just went, this is possible, and now you can buy it. And all of a sudden, it's not the 5 colors, but it's like we're on the color wheel and all those decisions get taken. So that's the starting point of where the show starts in the space when the audience walks in, and you've knocked away. It's not going to be a lighting design show. It's not going to be based on having walls that changes color and the contrast of the thing. It's going to be the object against a clean background, because that to me also, it seems like a logical place to start, or not logical, but it's a good place to start this first exploration of color and
I realized with the lighting design stuff, I was already just assuming it's like almost like why juggle then, right? I could just have been just as well been doing martial arts in different colored gloves, or again, the juggling was being stepped over again. If you could just jump straight to the lighting design, and I think in the end the lighting design is going to be the thing, but we had
it's another step anyway.
But we never tested the fundamental. We still hadn't done the fundamental.
And even then, you can sort of for the devil's advocate or whatever, they might still say about the that the juggling is still just juggling, and now you've put colors on the objects, but the juggling is the process of how it happens or whatever. Like it, and I genuinely don't believe it, but it just sort of popped into my head.
Oh yeah,
like,
no, totally.
The juggling is still, and that's what we're interested in, and then that's why the objects should just be single. Because if you put colors on them, then it's adding something more. But we're making the point that you are going to have to juggle it, and it's visually coming in, and to say that only the pattern that it traces in the air, that's the core of juggling, is a limited view of it, and it has many exponents, and you as a performing artist have now moved in and stepped up. So on that note, I go, let's just take that for granted.
Well, definitely. I mean, to be honest with you, the juggling in the show existed before.
Yeah,
I got the objects.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there was an editing process that happened, but I didn't end up with these new colors of juggling props and then sit down and say, how am I going to juggle these things? The only thing I did on this show as the first step, again, we don't have to skip over the beginning.
That's why I'm also like going, we've done all of this talking now to try to get to where the show starts, and now I want to move on to, like, we've stepped away from, for exactly that. You've limited down to a whole bunch of colored objects that didn't exist before.
Yeah.
I'm going to juggle them in the space.
Yeah.
And it's not about lighting design. It's not about any tricks, or there's not about any kind of other thing. It's just that. And now when you're revealing it yet again, it's like, actually, it's that, and then we're going to talk about what the stuff that you say to get the people into the space, to the headspace, to be prepared to take in the ring cycle, which is kind of like the biggest section of this this iteration of a show. So we talk about the ideas of how color gets introduced to them. But when you arrive in there, this is what we're working with: different colored props and juggling, and you haven't even sat down and gone, tell me, blue ring, what's the tricks that I do with
exactly
you?
Yeah,
haven't gotten there yet.
No.
But we know from what we're going to talk about Kandinsky and Ivar and whatever, that this question was asked in art, but it wasn't asked until 1907 or whatever.
Right.
So we'd had expressionism, we'd had impressionism. This was happening at that time. And then one guy, Vasily Kandinsky, writes a book on the spiritual in art and asks these questions of colors. What does the color specifically bring into it? And so we are at 40 years into the history of juggling as an art form. The argument for that can be made other places, but we are now arriving at a point where one person like Kandinsky or you are asking this question: what does this do? And this is your first exhibition of this. You've now got the colored props, and you're going out, and then so should we just take it like from the beginning of the show then to what the actual art, what the art?
Yeah.
So now the audience don't know any of these things. This is the 90% that's already happened, and this is the process of how do you arrive, and then you go, okay, what's that level one exploration of what it is? They walk into this art gallery, and that's for a start. Like, I think that's significant that this is in an art gallery, and it's not folk circus. You come in, it's completely arty. It's like people where they're drinking little things and having canapes and stuff.
Well, so exactly. Yeah, let's start there.
Yeah.
So you said that idea about you walk in and you see that wave of balls, like the color wheel on the floor and the rainbow arc of rings. And one thing is that back at the beginning of the whole thing 15 years ago, I was watching a show in the north of Finland, and it was a juggling show, and I love juggling, and I live juggling and breathe juggling. And I was watching the show, and I was completely turned off, disconnected. I didn't want to watch. I was just like, what is this? This is terrible. And I realized the person on stage was working with juggling, where all of the concepts were internal. They were inside the juggler. And even me as a technician couldn't even untangle or uncover or visually see what was happening, really. Yeah. It was just like a bunch of blah, 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 garbage in front of them, like really not visual.
Yeah.
And not clear. And I was working on a bunch of concepts in my life then. Like, I had 6 different projects, and one of them was the color thing. And I went home and I said, hey, you know what? At least at the end of the day, if I work on this color thing, even if it's good or not, it's going to look cool.
It's look beautiful.
And so when people walk in and they have that impression, that was really intentional as one of the first. But it was a pivotal moment in my life of being like, oh, yeah, I can have internal ideas and concepts, and they can either be visually expressed to an audience or they can be otherwise expressed. And I had a path a fork in the road. And this project really is intentionally taking that one road.
Because when it is in an art studio and you walk in and it looks as pretty as it is, and we'll put some links here to actually the show is on YouTube. You've put it up there, so you can go and look at it. And just looking at just that first bit where you go, as an art object, that thing in itself, that is already, you walked in and it looked like you were at an art exhibit of some sort.
Yeah. I mean, I was an artist in residence at the studio, at the art gallery, for a month, and there was exhibitions in the other room going on while I was working on my show. And a few times people, apparently, I wasn't there, but people would come in and look in the room where had my stuff set up. They thought it was an installation.
Yeah.
It wasn't they thought, oh, that's a cool piece of, you're done. That was pretty fun to have that concept of the work. I never thought of that, but like they just thought it was a conceptual art piece, to the point where even one woman thought that in the catalog of the art gallery, my performance was listed, that was fake. Oh, yeah. It was a fantasy of like, oh, it's a conceptual art piece where we're gonna have a juggling show with different colors, and that it was a sculpture. That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
but the whole art.
That also that points to how striking the wave of colors, which is made from perspex tubes cut at varying lengths.
Yeah. So it's a three-dimensional wave.
So it's a wave that's going and each ball of a different color. Standing in a line and at a different height.
Yeah,
so it genuinely is
108 balls.
108 balls in a pattern on the floor. Quite sort of...
I had my friend take a sine wave on a computer and make a 3D model of a sine wave and then just freeze it in time and then just populate it with 108 pixels. And then he just printed out the ratio of each height of each dot. And then I just cut perspex tubes. Yeah.
So from the look of it, you look at that and you're going... I don't know what it means, but such is the case with a lot of conceptual art. It's like you can't quite see the tubes. I mean, you can see them, but they're see-through. So when you look at it like that, you can easily just see 108 balls, juggling balls, each in a slightly different
3D
view,
space,
in a three-dimensional space.
Frozen
so that's
wave.
a beautiful image in itself, which is rare. But that you come into a juggling thing when we talk about folk circus, you come in and you pull it out of a suitcase and it's the same dirty club that you juggled on the street yesterday and you pull it out. But here, unique balls, not tainted by endless repetition of juggling. It's all so clean and all the rings are hanging up at the back, and there's also...
Well, so the art gallery thing came about also really intentionally because I wanted to drill it down to the basics of like, hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's not do lighting design show. We gotta start at the beginning. And then I really wanted the piece to be outside of theatrical time at first. So I thought, look, if you go to a theater, like here's the thing. I wanted the piece to be what it needed to be. But if you go to a theater, you can't have a show that's 12 minutes long. That's not a thing that people do. You can't sell a ticket and then people go see a show and it's 12 minutes long. Even if it's the best show you've seen in your life, you would be mad. Even if it was the best thing you've seen. And so I thought, and on the flip side, if I go to the theater and do a show that's 12 hours long, you're also like, hey, this is not what I signed up for. I just bought a ticket, So I thought, where is a space? I just wanted to take it out of a theatrical space to get out of theatrical time. And I thought an art gallery, because then it also is, you've already said it. It's like, look, if I go to the theater these days and I do a juggling show and you say, what's it about? I say it's about color. That's not really a conversation people are having. People are saying it's about the environment. It's about gender. It's about all these different environment. It's about the world we're living in. Like social issues is kind of the currency right now. But if you go to an art gallery, it's not so weird to talk about color. No, in fact, it's expected, right?
Yeah.
And so, first thing is being inside an art gallery allowed me to be free of what I'm calling this theatrical time expectation, and at the same time, it also was a place where we could have a conversation about color that didn't feel weird. It wasn't a bar. It wasn't on the street. It wasn't a street show. It wasn't at a school or...
Like we talked about with Dartis and Tamariz, you got to set up the environment for magic, in their case, for magic to happen. And for you, for art to happen whilst watching juggling, you have to do it in an art gallery. In a weird way, it's also like going like, why are we talking so much about this? And it is, of course, that when you do art, there are places where those happen, and folk circus that we talk about is art happening in those places. But it also invites, like, the message is part of the medium of how anything is expressed. So you see it in a shopping center. It doesn't matter if it's Yo-Yo Ma playing the thing, the cello. It is perceived in a different way.
Yeah.
Because it's not the right context or whatever.
Yeah.
So
I had the art gallery. I had the props. Let's just do the show, right? We're done. It's cool. We can just do it. But then it was like, I actually had the show done in 2020.
Oh, yeah.
And then pandemic came.
Oh, yeah.
And then that kind of put it on hiatus.
We spoke about the color show just before you left Vegas.
I sat you down the first time we actually hung out. I actually asked you about the color show. That was what I was doing, right? And then that kind of got done in 2020. Pandemic came. We switched gears to Reflex, and now I got back to this. And of course, when I got back to this is what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and that's one of my questions. Is like going, how did all the work that we had done on Reflex and working with text, how did this connect with this here show?
Exactly.
From the first iteration to this
That's
iteration.
what I was going to say is, it's like this, man. I even commissioned a sound check. I commissioned an electronic music score for the piece. It's a nice piece of music. I did not use it. Because when I came back to visit the piece after Reflex, I kind of started again. I mean, the show was done in 2020. The piece was done. I never performed it because of the pandemic. But when I came back to visit it again, I had this little thought, which was, again, the people who like this kind of work are going to come see the show and like it. The people who don't like this kind of work aren't going to come see it and they're not going to like it. And I really wanted to try to connect. I really find there was something in the show I wanted to share with people for real. Not just as an incidental, another contemporary circus piece of no lyric, electronic music that's an ambient wash over you for 40 minutes, and then I'm there in a neutral costume and I'm doing this abstract art and you kind of just passively watch it.
Yeah.
I really wanted to, I said, no, I want to say things, I want to make statements, I want to have a point of view. That's what I got from Reflex.
Yeah.
Was I want to have a specific point of view that I really share to the audience as accessible as I can be. And in that way, it did turn into this idea that I wanted to talk in the show. And I wanted to start to talk a little bit about the motivations. I mean, we've talked now for 90 minutes about all these motivations of why this show would exist. Think about that. Like, all these ideas and concepts are inside of me. And for me to just go on stage and put on this, this music and just kind of juggle the rings in different patterns and not look at the audience. You know what I mean? It's this cliche.
And that's exactly
contemporary circus stuff.
Are we dealing with the letting the thing speak for itself? There's a fine line between it's saying something concrete that you actually you connect to it, and it being Untitled 34.
Yeah.
Color Explorations by Jay Gilligan. Here's number 34.
Exactly.
And you just piece it together. But if you actually believe that you're unfolding an aspect of juggling which has not really been dealt with like this before, place it into an art context, make this thing matter. And as I said, you gotta record this. You gotta record, always record. And now you put that out, already getting some good feedback, and it's only been out for one day on YouTube by the time we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
And lost my thread there a little bit, but it's and there's a documentary about to come out that was also filmed with more of these aspects, and this is also part of this thing to go,
totally.
All right, this thing happened, and that's also partly what happens within the art world too. Duchamp puts the toilet on the pedestal, and it's a thing. You can't now we need to rework the definitions of art. We don't need to talk about that, but it's going, okay, cool, because now this has happened. And I'm not saying that this is you putting the toilet on the thing, but all of these things around it that we talk about it for an hour and a half before we can start talking about the show.
Yeah.
And you now going I want to have this specific thing to say, that it won't just be something that it happened and it was a wash of ambient music and just juggling patterns, and people go, yeah, he juggled many colors, but you wanted to have a stronger point of view.
Yeah.
I wanted
to dare to say something
more serious. Exactly.
Yeah.
You wanted to say something.
I wanted to dare to make a statement. And I think that's maybe it goes back again to the self-esteem thing. I don't think on a day-to-day level or with my work, I mean, I have bad self-esteem, but definitely I don't feel in the current climate of like what's trendy and what's being bought and sold and what's kind of the normal thing. Yeah, you don't really come out and make statements and declarative statements and kind of give a super big point of view, specific point of view, because you want to appeal as much as you can to everybody. Yeah. So you kind of have a middle, you take a middle ground, right? And I said, no, at least I want people to either love the show or hate the show. I mean, I don't want to antagonize people on purpose, but I want to be specific. And so one thing that happened is before when I was in the middle of creating the show, is because the show premiered during a circus festival here. Oh, yeah, it was a contemporary circus festival. So a journalist called me, and you could tell, I swear you could tell, she was hired, she was paid, and she had to call me and do a 2-minute interview to get a little soundbite for her thing because she was hired to do it. She could not care less about juggling or me or anything. It was just like, I got to go down the list and call these 30 different performers, and oh my God, and I'm late and I'm bored and whatever. So she starts talking to me on the phone, and you can really tell that she does not care. She just wants me to say, like, I'm going to juggle chainsaws, and I cut my foot off last night, but we're going to try our best. That's what she wants, really. But after, like, 30 seconds, I kind of, because I can't do that. Like, it's not the truth. And so I just didn't have the energy, too, to fake it. And I just started to talk about the process, and I did a 15-minute version of this conversation we've had. And she was kind of, like, taken aback. And at the end of the 15 minutes, I just kept talking. And it was fun for me to try to explain this to someone in the middle of the process, I was linking it in my brain. She goes, oh my God, are you going to tell this to the audience? And I was immediately like, no, I'm not going to tell any of this. This is my process. And she goes, yeah, but when you tell it like this, it's amazing. And wow. And it is that moment of Derek Delgadio talking to Frank Oz about the brick disappearing, and then Frank Oz is like, why do you make the brick disappear? And in and of itself, and then Derek says, well, it's because my mother was gay, and we got some hate in the neighborhood, and a brick came through the window, and blah, 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 now the brick, and I make the brick disappear. And then Frank says, that's the show. And
Derek goes, no way.
Yeah, Derek's like, I don't want to tell the audience these personal stories. That's too cliche for a one-man show. And then that became the show. But on the phone that day with this woman, I said another thing to her that I did stick with. I said, well, I'm not going to tell these specific things to the audience because it's not a lecture. It's a piece of art. It's a performance. And then I started to think, maybe I should tell them something.
Yeah.
And then what it came down to is, what should I tell the audience? And so what I ended up doing was this. So the show was called Another Sunset because I wanted the title of the show to give some information to the audience of how they might perceive what I'm doing, or how they might experience it. And so I tried to think, okay, a sunset, it's very calm. It lasts a long time. You don't expect it to change all of a sudden and do something crazy. Like the sun's going to go down in the sky, and we know that. And so we give ourselves up to that, and we don't worry about that anymore. And you start to notice little details of all the colors in the sunset. And I thought, well, that's what I need from this show, from the audience. I need the audience to care about the different colors of objects in the air. Because if they don't care about that level of detail, there's nothing else going on in the show. It's not about, I'm going to juggle 11 balls and then 12 and then 13. It's not about, I'm going to juggle a chainsaw and cut my foot off. It's about, I'm going to juggle these patterns of different colors. And if you don't care about that,
that's okay, but that's
what pretty short conversation,
Yeah.
And so I started to think about how, like, what am I going to tell the audience if I'm not going to tell them the process of the show? Like, what do I have to say to them? And so I had this idea. Another Sunset is the name of the show, and then I started thinking, well, I'm looking at juggling from a different angle. I'm caring about color. So what if I look at sunsets from a different angle? Maybe I could start to talk about sunsets also from that same point of view. So maybe a sunset, instead of thinking that the sun is going down in the horizon, it's the earth going up in front of the sun. It's an eclipse, right? So then I talk about eclipses in the show. And I talk about sunsets in different ways and juggling in different ways, that juggling can be art, and in color in different ways. And that's kind of the three things I talk about in the show in terms of the text, to give the audience an entry point into what I'm trying to do.
The sunset is blue on Mars, so that's how the color.
Right, that's how the show,
color, because you just sort of brought color in on the end there, but it's
right.
It's
I say sunsets on Mars are blue, and it's because of the Martian atmosphere has a lot of dust in it, and so because of the angle of the rays, blah blah blah, science.
Blah blah blah. Light refracts, and in the refraction of it,
the red waves get bounced out, and
Yeah.
the blue remain, and
Yeah.
so sunsets are blue on Mars instead of red as they are here on Earth.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a big starting point for the show too, to be like, oh, let's look at the world from a different perspective, and that's kind of the overarching theme of the show. Not just specifically juggling, but kind of to expand that out into the other themes I'm dealing with: sunsets, astronomy, color, science, and have a little bit of
And
a
that's
different...
also an ongoing theme. That was also part of the theme of reflex as
yeah.
well. And you probably talked about it before, but space is an interest, and it just is also, if you don't use religious terminology, by the time you go as big as space and these concepts, which you are going very big here, because I remember a conversation we had and we realized that we had to go back to the beginning, which you do, and go back to
the big bang,
to the Big Bang,
yeah,
which leads in a cheeky way into the opening act of the show.
Yeah,
because you do this little sort of speech first about all of this, and then this speech basically ends with you going back to the very beginning.
yeah.
And you're talking about the Big Bang.
Yeah, we talked about this in the hotel room that one day. I forgot about that till now.
Yeah, hotel room, and then we talked about it again
in Helsinki,
Finland as well. Yeah.
But in the hotel room, it was about the opening of the show. Because again, it was still rebelling against that the impetus. So the beginning of the show is I have a microwave on stage, a microwave oven, and I cook 3 potatoes. And I juggle the 3 potatoes.
So that starts without people really knowing what's going on. You've said some stuff and you start the oven without saying it. And then later on you go...
And then I start to explain the mechanics, the science of color, which gets into the wavelengths of light, therefore wavelengths of radiation, therefore wavelengths microwaves.
Yeah.
And that was just a funny little idea of like, I don't want to come out with a neutral face, fourth wall up, wearing gray, juggling this to this like electronic soundscape, and then just disappear after a half hour, and there's been no...
Yep.
So I was really like, oh, what would be a fun way to start the show? Because again, there's this idea, we're in an art gallery, there is a seriousness to that, right? There is everybody has a reverence in the art gallery. It's the white cube syndrome.
Nobody clapped for the whole show. That's a particular kind of show. You come in, it's an art space, you do tricks, and I can tell that you're holding back, but you still go stomp, catch the last thing. In any other setting you see juggling,
there you go.
They would clap.
Yeah.
But here, even like there's a pull towards clapping, but they don't do it because it's not that kind of show.
Also, there was like, I limited the audience to 10 people.
Oh, yeah.
Per show, because it's a small space, and also space. I just wanted it to be an intimate experience, and then you don't really have that critical mass of the one person who claps more than the other, whatever. True. But also just to say, when you're in an art space, things get a bit serious.
Yeah.
And that was why I was like, well, I'm gonna microwave some potatoes. They're gonna get hot. I'm gonna juggle the hot potatoes, and it's gonna be related to this wavelengths of light thing. Is a little bit of a funny idea.
But it's like it's looking at colors. A color is only within what we call the visible light spectrum. It just means visible. There's just a part of wavelengths that just happens to be able to be seen by the human eye. Insects can see others. Fishes can see other colors in the other end of the spectrum because it's in the water. And it's just so you start there, and then you just go, well, there are all of the ultraviolet, but they're infrareds, and that goes all the way down, and then the same kind of wavelengths, they just can't see it, but it's the same thing. So you're just like starting a scope as big as you could.
And we talk about the Big Bang because of the cosmic microwave background radiation that's spreading out from the Big Bang.
The white noise on your TV in the olden days when you had a TV that actually pulled in signals like that, then you could see elements of what you saw in the black and white flimmering on your TV.
And this kind of
from the
grand, huge Big Bang contrasted against microwaving potatoes and juggling
potatoes
them.
and then juggling them, which is great, because it's true. You could have come out, then you could have just done the I leave it to you, I just juggle, and color is relative to each one of us. That's why it's best to say nothing or whatever. But you come out and you do that, and it's also like me as a showman who always thinks about making the threshold a certain level, it's good to start there to grab them in, because they're also sort of expecting juggling to be a little bit like that in a way. So you're giving them a little bit like we gave them strong juggling in the beginning of Reflex to go, yeah, this is juggling, and now we're going to explode it into all sorts of other ways. And you do that here too. It's art, and it's like, whoa, huge concepts, couldn't go bigger. Origin of the universe, origin of everything, of time and space and color, and everything started then, but there was no colors because there was no eyes to see yet. And it was all like this, like you're just in this incredible space, and then you basically go the Big Bang, and you open the door, ding, and you take them out, and they're super hot, and and then you juggle hot potatoes, and it's and it then goes like, it becomes funny or whatever, but it is also poignant. So it's not the gimmick in that way, because it's like it sets the space. And very interesting.
So the other thing I learned from you working on Reflex together that I brought into this show was that these little vignettes of text in between each section was, again, hopefully to set up the audience to be ready to see the main thing of the show, which was the colored ring cycle at the end, the biggest part of the show. It was almost like the little sections before the ring cycle were little tutorials or like little vignettes to hopefully prime the audience that by the time I got to this 15-minute chunk of juggling that just doesn't stop, it's these 150 rings and these 45 patterns or whatever, that they're ready to take that in. And they're not only that they're ready to take it in, but they're curious, and they're like, wow, this is cool. That was kind of one of the intentions of...
And in that sense, that is also the thing that we did with Reflex. And which means that when we said earlier on in this conversation, or in the last one, that, well, I'm of course I'm not going to say that, because this is not a lecture,
right?
But in a sense, it is a little bit of a lecture as well. And the reason for that is that we are aware that a bunch of the people who watch this will be jugglers. It will be people who are interested in circus, contemporary or otherwise, and they come in, so they come with that expectation, and we want to take them along and saying, we're stepping into art, but we know where we come from, and we know, so you're giving the content, you're giving them the transition, and taking into account that this has only happened in the last 40 years, and you mention Kandinsky to the average person on the street and they don't know who it is, or you mention Duchamp and they might not know his name either, but they might have remembered the toilet or the pissoir on the pedestal. And so they know so little about even these important epochal things of within art that is an iconic thing. And certainly they don't know the names of any of the jugglers who made any of the big things, Anthony Gatto or Michael Motion or whatever. Most people don't know them. You say the name and they don't know it, just like when I say Penn and Teller, huge portion of the audience don't, or the people that I talk to don't even know who they are. Been on TV for 30 years. It's like, and you still don't know about it. So, So it is to try to take the people out and to take something which they think they know, juggling, and to point to other things, and to be aware that to just juggle to music will make them see it only as, oh, he's just juggling colored rings. Yeah, that was...
And again, people who are into that are going to be like, cool.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
People who aren't into that are going to be like, oh, it's that stuff again that I don't...
It's just a whole bunch of visual stuff here, and it's really like wishy-washy. Like, it's just like... It is there if you can really live yourself into it, but people don't watch juggling. Like, when I'm saying people, it's like the general audience do not watch juggling like that, and they also don't listen to music like that. So they don't listen to contemporary classical impenetrable music and go, that I really didn't get that. Okay, I'm gonna have to listen to it another 5 times immediately so that I can try to understand what it is that the artist is doing here, because it's offending me or something, whatever. Nobody thinks that. They go, that this didn't resonate with me. So the thing that we're doing with is to acknowledge the truth of the situation and try to bring the people who are there in and change their perception of what juggling is. And the vignettes in the beginning of the show is doing that role. It's not a lecture, and they're not as connected as they were in... It's not a linear story.
No.
It's more like it's vignettes that points to different things, because just like you were talking about when we talked about your teaching, you feel like now the teaching needs to change because all of those, it's all bullshit. They don't get to the truth, but it's because you have a different truth to tell. So this is it. You're telling them 5 different vignettes that goes, look at it in the hugest scope.
Look, it's that different points of view. Like we're going to look at juggling from this point of view. So what about color from this point of view, or the astronomy, or science, or whatever?
Yeah.
One thing I did keep from the original version from 2020 was that then the first real juggling that starts in the show is with props that are all black colored.
Let's start this up again, because I realize we need to take one more. So we're going to start next episode.
Okay, cool.
From talking about because now now it took us we thought that we would be done after the first episode.
This is the definition of juggling on the first season of Object Episodes with Eric. We had let's just do the first episode about the definition of juggling. 3 episodes later, still talking about it.
Yeah, because it's the result here of an artist that has been trying to open up a new domain, open up the color, and the show is just the 10%, so we're capturing some of the 90% now. But we'll be right back after this.
See you next time.
Wow, today I am living in a caravan, as I have for the last few weeks, and it's amazing how the weather affects you when you're living in a caravan. The way that the rain drums on the metal roof of the caravan, and it's loud, and you're lying inside, or you're working, writing on your next season for your podcast, or you're doing whatever, and you can't even really sort of sit outside with the sort of... I have a little roof out the front of the caravan here, but you can't even really see there because it sort of splashes up. So leave the door a little bit open so the dog can go in and out, and constantly having to wipe his feet and belly from going out in the rain so it doesn't dirty up the caravan. But you are closer to nature, and I do have a spectacular little cliff face, and I have a lot of beautiful nature. Trees that come right down, tiny little birds. Yesterday, I think I have talked about this on a previous episode, maybe. But there was a tiny little bird which is so small that it flew over and then landed on a dandelion, one of those with the puffballs, and started to pick those seeds off the puffball. And it was so little that it could sit there, and it bent it. It fully bent it. It was not like the dandelion was super strong or anything, or that the bird was that microscopic, but it tilted the thing down and then was eating the seeds off it. I have never seen that a bird eats the seeds of a puffball dandelion, and how did it manage to separate those out? I couldn't tell, because it was too far away and the bird was too little. I couldn't see that little beak greedily snapping on those seeds. But anyway, it must have been able to, because I don't think such a little bird would have stuffed their tiny little stomachs with all that fluff that normally carries those seeds away so they can grow somewhere else in someone else's lawn. All right, that's going to be everything for today. You know the drill. I know that at least 1 or 2 of you must have told your friends. I saw that from the download list last time. To see that when all of a sudden I can see that somebody's downloaded 30. One person has downloaded 30 episodes in sequence, going backwards and sometimes going from forward. Then I know that at least one of you have managed to convert and preach the way to your friends. So thanks so much to those of you who have done it. And with that said, take care of yourself and those you love, and I hope to see you along the way.